Welcome to DIY Easy Crafts and Berg Today we're going to take a look at Mad Max custom fish scale knife handles. Now we did a lot of striped bass fishing this last fall, and as a result I did a couple of full blade etchings on some chef knives, the striped bass themed. Joseph from Mad Max Knives was able to take a photograph of the fish that I caught and turn them into beautiful knife handles or scales. So this is what I got from the photograph. I sent him a close-up photograph of the fish. He took those and I guess he prints them on multiple sheets of paper and he layers them almost like a micarta, but it's a priority process that he uses. I believe he uses both heat and pressure to create the scale material. Now I sanded the scales, just to make sure that they were roughed up a little bit and completely flat. I also scuffed up the liner material. In this case, I'm going to use black liner. Just going to go nicely with these scales. And I'm going to use a good two-part epoxy. This is G-Flex. So I'm going to glue the scales to the liners, and I've got this just on some parchment paper and on a flat board, and then I clamp everything down, and I'll let that, usually I let that sit overnight to dry. Once the liners are dry, I clean up the scales a little bit. I attach both sides together with some painter's tape. And then I'm going to shape the forward edge of the handles. Now, if you had a lot of material to take off, you could do that on a bandsaw or a pin saw. In this case, I didn't have that much. I just did it, right on the 2x72. I did sand it down to 1000 grit, and then I went over to the polishing wheel. Just a little bit of polishing compound. Once the scales are glued onto the blade, you just could never get to that forward edge to polish them. The next step is I taped the actual blade onto the stack of handles, and I'm going to use that blade as a drill guide. Now notice I've got a piece of wood underneath it to prevent any blowout from the drill bit, and I've also got a clamp which prevents that blade from catching and spinning. And by pressing down a little bit with your finger, you can see where the hole's supposed to be in the blade, and just follow it right down with the drill. Next step is going to be to glue up the handles. So I glue up the handle material independently, the pins, and then I glue up both sides of the blade. And once this is all assembled, I'll put 3 or 4 clamps on it. I'll make sure I clean off any of that two-part epoxy that squeezes out onto the blade. I usually use just a little alcohol wipe for that, paper towel, and then an alcohol wipe. And then I'll let that sit and dry overnight. Once that's dry, I can cut off the excess material, in this case with a bandsaw. And then I will start to finish profiling those handles right on the back on the 2x72 with a coarse grit belt. I try to do as much shaping on the 2x72 as possible. Now, if I had to complain about anything at all with these knife handles, it would just be the thickness. They're not quite as thick as I would like them to be. The end result is absolutely perfect. But it doesn't give you really too much extra room to work with. So when you're working with and polishing the flats of these handles, you don't want to use a real coarse grit that you're going to have to go back and sand off all of those deep grind lines. So that's the only modification that I made with these handles compared to other handle material. Instead of using a 60 grit to shape the handles, I used an 80 grit. And actually I did a majority of it with a 120. So I'm rounding over that top edge Just real careful not to hit the blade at all. And then I use the bottom contact wheel to kind of shape that lower edge of the handles. And then I'll finish sanding these with an oscillating sander and a little bit of hand sanding. I sanded it down to 1200 grit. Really a cool concept, because now you have a customer that wants a custom knife made with with a fishing design on it. He can send a picture of his prized catch or his trophy catch, and you can actually make a knife that has an image of his fish scales right on the handle. This is the finished blade that I made. It's a striped bass themed chef's knife. I was very happy with the results. No inclusions, no little white spots on these, I'll call them paper micarta scales. And I'll leave a link below how to contact Joseph from Mad Max right in the description. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. By all means, check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com and BergKnifemaking.com. If you're interested in knife making, check out the book that Jason Northgard and I put out a few years back called Introduction to Knife Making, and you can find that on Amazon.com. Thank you very much for watching.